Cole stood alone atop a hill within a world devoid of color. A shroud of fog enveloped him, disorienting him about his location. He could barely discern anything beyond a mere 5 feet in any direction, the dead grass beneath his feet being the sole reference point. The fog concealed any movement, yet he detected distant sounds. Initially resembling the creaking of rusty chains, the noise gradually approached, revealing a damp and raspy undertone. Unmoving, he confronted the intensifying clamor, realizing with dread that it was the sound of breathing. As the ominous presence drew nearer, another sound emerged, a woman's voice, though her words remained muffled and unintelligible amidst the cacophony of wheezes. Struggling to decipher her speech, Cole battled against the overwhelming noises. Suddenly, a cold sensation grazed his shoulder, jolting his eyes open. His surroundings transformed, inundated by light and color, revealing wooden railings and a ceiling light. It had all been a dream. None of it was real. Morning greeted Cole in his customary breathless and wheezing state. The young boy perceived his mother shaking him and heard her urgent voice. Sitting up, he rubbed the sleep from his eyes, finding his mother standing over him, conveying urgency. "Wake up, dear. Remember, we have an appointment with Dr. Mendelsohn today." Attempting to draw a breath and respond, he wrestled with his constricted airways, battling thick mucus. As his lungs convulsed, he managed to expel a lump of putrid green mucus onto his sheets, finally restoring his breath. Observing her son's productive cough, his mother visibly winced, quickly transitioning back to her affectionate demeanor upon glimpsing the pain in Cole's eyes. "I apologize, sweetie," she comforted. "Let me fetch a paper towel and clean that up." With that, she hurried off towards the bathroom, instructing her son, "Get up and get dressed, sweetheart. We need to get going." Seated on his bed, Cole watched his mother depart, contemplating a message he wished to convey. Something about a dream involving a dreadful white light. Though sensing the significance of his visions, the words to convey it eluded him. All he comprehended was an aversion to the impending doctor's visit. The moment his mother mentioned Dr. Mendelsohn, Cole understood they were bound for the hospital. Detesting the place for its glaring lights and antiseptic odors, he chose not to protest. Instead, he rose from his bed and began changing out of his dinosaur pajamas, preparing for the impending car ride. An unusually polite and compliant 8-year-old, Cole seldom complained, rarely shed tears, and consistently adhered to his mother's instructions. In silence, Cole got dressed and headed to the bathroom. There was an absence of words and companionship. His father had left for work, and the swift pacing sounds downstairs indicated his mother's anxious anticipation of his readiness. Despite his sleepiness, Cole didn't want to keep his mother waiting. He closed the bathroom door behind him and began searching for his toothbrush. Unusually fatigued, Cole contemplated the small bathroom. He realized he had been grappling with tiredness for quite some time. The reason was elusive, yet the exhaustion felt peculiar. Though he had spent most of the previous day indoors and enjoyed a full night's sleep, weariness lingered. As Cole turned on the faucet to start brushing his teeth, his focus began to slip. He let the water flow for minutes, adrift in a fog of drowsiness. However, an awakening jolted him from this trance after a while. An icy touch landed on Cole's shoulder. Startled, he spun around to face the presence, only to find the bathroom empty. There was nothing behind him. Gathering himself, he recited a familiar phrase his mother often used in moments like these. "Silly boy, you've allowed your imagination to overpower you again." He repeated the words as a grounding mantra. After a few deep breaths, he regained his composure and returned to the sink. Yet as he gazed into the bathroom mirror, the freezing sensation revisited him, causing Cole to drop his toothbrush onto the tiled floor. In the bathroom mirror's reflection, directly before him, stood the emaciated form of a man. The stranger was tall and dressed in a vintage fashion. He adorned a worn, moth-eaten black suit accompanied by a drab red tie. Gaunt and frail, the man projected an air of age and ailment. His complexion was pallid and sickly, while his gray hair appeared lackluster and thin. Hunched over, the man's raspy, moist breathing on Cole's neck indicated his fragile state of health. If at any point the young boy experienced a twinge of worry for the intruder, it vanished swiftly upon glimpsing the man's wide, milky eyes. Those eyes held an expression simultaneously intense and vacant. The stranger locked his gaze onto Cole, resembling the unreflective scrutiny of a lesser predator. This look was familiar to the boy. He had witnessed it when observing the family cat observing little birds nesting outside his bedroom window. Facing the mirror, the stranger's sizable, spindly fingers bore into the boy's shoulder, an unsettling grip that endured for a harrowing moment. In that instance, the gray light of morning seemed to dim, muting the rain's patter and blaring car horns. All that resonated was the stranger's chilling, congested breath. Confusion overwhelmed Cole, and an inner voice urged him to scream, advice he longed to follow. Yet he found himself paralyzed by terror, his limbs immobilized by horror. Thus he remained fixed for another agonizing beat, until forceful thumps echoed at the door. Through the doorway came shouts from someone beyond. The vehement pounding surpassed the unsettling breathing, jolting him from his trance. Swiftly, Cole turned toward the bathroom's escape and sprinted, refraining from glancing back, dreading the man's intentions. The bathroom door's knob was seized by his small hands, yanked so fiercely that the door swung wide. His rush to safety led him to stumble into the corridor and collapse. Gradually, Cole's consciousness returned, revealing his mother's anxious countenance above him. Attempting to convey the unfolding ordeal, he struggled to articulate about the bathroom intruder, the eerie gaze, and the unsettling breath's cadence. All that emerged, however, were desperate cries, resembling the wails of an infant. A profound embarrassment engulfed the boy, having always prided himself on detachment and self-possession. Summoning every ounce of control, Cole made a final endeavor to communicate the bathroom stranger's presence. Though his words remained incomprehensible, he gestured toward the now open door, revealing its enigma. There was nothing to see, absolutely nothing. The bathroom appeared entirely ordinary, except for his damp toothbrush resting on the tile where he had dropped it. It was as though no one had been there with him. Cole gazed at the vacant room, his disbelief evident. He had no idea how to react. Eventually, he looked up at his mother, desperately seeking guidance in this unsettling and unfamiliar moment. His mother, however, regarded him with a mixture of pity and affection. "I'm sorry, honey," she said. "I know you dislike going to the hospital, but I promise it'll help you feel better." She offered him an uncertain smile and embraced him. But something felt off to Cole. There was something wrong with her reaction. Her hold lingered longer than usual, and he couldn't understand why. Her embrace seemed odd, almost maternal, like a baby holding onto its mother. Eventually, she let go and said, "Come on, let's head to the car." Taking his hand, she led him down the stairs. As they descended, Cole pondered his mother's words. If he were to believe her, there hadn't been a man there at all. He had simply overreacted to the journey, that was all. Yes, it was the hospital he despised. That was the cause. Cole repeated his mother's words like a mantra. "Silly boy, your imagination got the best of you once again." He repeated the thought as his mother helped him into his raincoat and guided him out of the hallway. They hurried down the stairs and reached the front door. Cole was surprised by his mother's urgency. When he struggled with his raincoat, she picked him up and carried him to the door, an unusual sight. He had always known his mother to be relaxed. This behavior was different, making him realize the doctor's appointment held great significance. As she opened the door, a blast of October wind swept in, sending cold rain into his jacket's openings. The storm's cries triggered more coughing, forcing him to pause and catch his breath. Observing her son's coughing, his mother turned and swiftly lifted him before hurrying to the car. She settled him in the back of the family SUV without delay. However, as she moved to the driver's seat, another bout of coughing seized him. This forceful coughing elicited a concerned query from the front seat. "Cole, are you okay, sweetheart?" Along with a worried glance in the rearview mirror. Amid two productive wet coughs into a tissue, Cole managed to rasp, "I'm okay, Mom." His mother, reassured by his response, nodded. Without further words, she turned the ignition key and began the journey to the hospital. While they drove, the car's heaters gradually dispelled the chill within, leading to Cole's coughs becoming less frequent, and the mucus lessened as well. The cold feeling in his stiff fingers ebbed away, and the pain in his chest subsided. Finally, as they left the meandering suburban roads of their residence, Cole's ability to think clearly returned. The car's pace slowed as it merged into the dense morning traffic bound for the city where Cole's doctor was located. His mother, who had stopped sending worried glances through the rearview mirror, switched on the radio. With the car's warm yet stuffy air now filled by the soothing, monotonous hum of the AM radio, Cole felt the weariness that had greeted him in the morning seep back into his body, which ached with a dull pain. His eyelids grew heavy, and with a yawn he rested his head against the seatbelt, gradually succumbing to sleep. Just as Cole was on the brink of slumber, another sound brushed against his awareness. It was distant but carried a rhythmic steadiness. As the sound persisted, it gradually overcame the backdrop of raindrops tapping and the radio's faint, grainy noise. Eventually, Cole identified the sound for what it was, a struggle for breath, strained and labored. Startled by the realization, his eyes shot open, and he frantically scanned the car's interior. He searched every corner for the ominous tall stranger, the one with pale, sallow skin and predatory white eyes. Yet his quest yielded nothing. There was no sign of that unsettling presence. Unsatisfied, Cole rushed to press his face against the window, but even in the midst of the rainstorm outside, all he could discern were gray skies and the blurred rush of cars braving the storm. With growing certainty that he was alone with his mother, Cole's tears began to flow. Evidently his crying caught his mother off guard. She had assumed her son was asleep until then. Reacting swiftly, she inquired, "Cole, what's the matter, sweetheart? Are you okay?" Amid his tears, Cole attempted to respond, "Mommy, His voice trailed off. What exactly was wrong? He sensed that something was amiss, something terribly wrong, but the young boy lacked the vocabulary to articulate it. He yearned to tell his mother about the man, the cold grip on his shoulder, and the overwhelming fear he had experienced. He wanted to share these feelings, but an invisible barrier held him back. Gazing at his mother through the rearview mirror, he detected a crack forming in her previously composed demeanor. Something unfamiliar and disconcerting had entered her warm, familiar gaze. When he looked at his mother, Cole recognized the same fear he had encountered in his own reflection earlier that morning in the bathroom. Somehow, despite lacking the words to elucidate the reason, he grasped that she comprehended the gravity of the situation all too well. Cole was facing a perplexing dilemma. At the age of 8, he found himself overwhelmed by an indescribable fear. The woman before him, once an embodiment of unwavering strength, now witnessed his vulnerability, leaving him utterly speechless. His ability to articulate his feelings eluded him, reducing him to tears that flowed ceaselessly. Despite his mother's persistent inquiries, he couldn't muster a response. Eventually, he managed to voice a single sentence. "Mommy, the sound. I hate the sound." His mother's eyes softened as she heard his words, replacing her initial fear with empathy. "I understand, sweetheart. We'll be at the doctor's soon, and they'll make it better." Her words were comforting, but Cole detected a falsehood beneath the sweetness. He couldn't fathom the reason, but he knew his mother was not being entirely honest. The sound persisted, and Cole gradually comprehended that he was powerless to halt it. Alone in his distress, he attempted to stifle his sobs, but the tears continued to flow throughout the journey. His mother had turned off the radio, leaving only the symphony of his muffled cries, the rhythmic patter of rain on the windows, and the faint but eerie sound of labored breathing. Only upon their arrival at the vast hospital parking lot did Cole wipe his tears away and put on a facade of bravery. He repeated his mother's words like a desperate mantra. "Silly boy, you've allowed your imagination to overpower you again." Yet the words failed to provide solace. Even within the bustling hospital environment, the wheezing persisted, distant and elusive, yet unrelenting. The hospital interior was a world awash in white, illuminated by the ubiquitous hum of fluorescent lights. Liberated from the stifling confines of the car, Cole endeavored to divert his attention from the enigmatic, rasping breaths. While his mother attended to the check-in process, he surveyed the room for distractions. His gaze landed on a girl his age, accompanied by her parents. She appeared delicate, much like him, but her nostrils were connected to plastic tubes. These tubes extended to a sizable metallic apparatus that Cole had seen frequently within hospital walls. He observed her for a while, attempting to comprehend the purpose of the tubes. When their eyes met, he quickly averted his gaze. His attention then shifted to a sign near the entrance. Its bold letters declared, "Marion Jacobus Pediatric Ward." Cole struggled briefly to decipher the meaning behind those words. Despite his efforts to occupy himself, the intrusive breathing grew more challenging to ignore. As his mother completed the required paperwork, Cole's frantic glances darted around the room in search of the elusive source of the sounds. Once again, he found nothing and attempted another diversion. A television hung on the wall, silently broadcasting familiar cartoons to the empty room. However, the breathing dominated his thoughts, inducing a mounting sense of panic. Just before he could succumb to his distress, his mother finished the paperwork. In an instant, a voice called his name from the hallway of examination rooms, propelling them forward once more. Guided by the voice, mother and son traversed a sterile corridor lined with identical doors. Upon reaching the room designated for Cole, the orderly gestured for both him and his mother to enter, assuring them that the doctor would join them shortly. To Cole, all the examination rooms he had been in appeared indistinguishable. The counters consistently held the same assortment of jars containing swabs and sharp black tips. Each room felt like a replica of the last. The only distinguishing feature was the design on the privacy curtains enveloping the examination tables. During his previous visit, the curtains had showcased a field of bunnies. On another occasion, it had been adorned with dogs donning suits. This time, cutesy safari animals with black button eyes adorned the fabric. Cole attempted to study the patterned curtains attentively, his struggle against the unsettling breathing intensifying. However, any solace he sought from the playful patterns was short-lived. The moment they settled into the sterile examination room, the doctor arrived. Dr. Mendelsohn was a compact, stern woman with graying brown hair. Despite her diminutive stature, she leaned down to address him, although she scarcely needed to lower herself to meet his gaze. "Hello there, pal," she said with a feigned warmth. "I just need to have a quick word with your mom out there in the corridor. We won't be long, all right?" Cole wanted to protest. Clearly, things were far from all right. He had no desire to be left alone with the unsettling breathing. Suppressing his objections, he glanced at his mother. Observing the wild trepidation in her green eyes, he felt a pang of shame for his own fear and nodded silently, signifying his agreement to the doctor's plan. With his mother's departure alongside Dr. Mendelsohn, Cole's attention returned to the curtain. The instant the door clicked shut, the breathing grew in volume, causing his heart to plummet to his stomach. He involuntarily recoiled as a chill pervaded the room. Against his better judgment, he shifted his gaze toward the source of the icy sensation. He was certain that no one had entered, nor had the door been opened. Yet, inexplicably, there stood a man, tall, pallid, and stooped in the corner of the room, between the door hinges and the wall. Familiar dread surged through Cole's veins, but he dared not call out. Following his mother's reaction earlier that day, he understood that any outcry for help would be in vain. Stripped of any authoritative figure to turn to, he felt utterly helpless. The idea struck him as absurd, but Cole contemplated offering a wave and a greeting to the stranger. After all, his mother had taught him to extend such courtesies when meeting someone new. He nearly acted on the impulse, yet an instinct within him prevailed. Something about this man evoked an indescribable feeling in Cole, something fundamentally and profoundly awry. It turned out that the boy didn't need to reach a decision. Only a minute passed since he'd spotted the stranger in the room when the sound of the examination room door opening shattered the tense atmosphere. Cole kept his gaze fixed on the stranger even as he heard his mother's entrance and the sound of his name. The man remained still and unresponsive. His tormented expression showed no change, and his cloudy stare stayed locked onto the boy. Cole's mother had to grab him and shake her son before he could avert his eyes from the figure. Her eyes were wide with concern. The doctor stood a few feet behind his mother, hands clasped in front of her, her composed features marked by worry. Neither woman acknowledged the presence in the corner. They didn't spare a glance for the stranger, but the unmistakable fear in Cole's mother's eyes revealed that somehow she understood what observed them. "Are you all right, Cole? Are you all right?" Despite the presence of the eerie figure, The urgency in his mother's pleading voice outweighed his fear. He didn't know how to respond. An internal sense told him that he wasn't all right, but he lacked the words to articulate why. With nothing else to say, he managed only, "I'm okay, Mom." Upon hearing her son's voice, his mother visibly relaxed and rose from her kneeling position by his side. Cole noticed that despite her outward calm, the fear had yet to leave her eyes. After exchanging concerned glances, Dr. Mendelsohn spoke again. "All right, Cole, your mom and I needed to discuss your medication." At this point, Cole was hardly registering his doctor's words. His attention had returned to the corner where the man still loomed. The stranger hadn't departed. He remained in the same spot as he had appeared, unmoving except for the faint rise and fall of his chest with each labored breath. Cole felt an urge to scream. Both adults refused to acknowledge the apparition, but the expressions in their eyes confirmed that they were aware of its presence. Fear dwelled in both pairs of eyes. The doctor's fear appeared tempered, as if the specter in the room was a colleague rather than an intruder. In his mother's eyes, in contrast, the terror was unfiltered and desperate, mirroring his own, yet she persisted in ignoring the stranger. Overwhelmed, Cole could only nod and defer to the wisdom of his elders. After all, they knew better. As the boy remained silent, Dr. Mendelsohn recognized his acquiescence for what it was and moved on. The doctor informed him that he would start a new medication regimen. She provided detailed instructions on how to cut the pills correctly and when to take them. After praising him perfunctorily for his compliance and calling him a very good boy, she betrayed her true feelings with a deceitful expression. She added, "Continue with your medication and follow the prescribed treatments, and you'll likely see improvement soon." Cole paid little attention, his focus drawn to the man lurking in the corner. Despite the doctor's attempts to reassure him, her words felt insincere. Cole sensed the emptiness of her promises. He couldn't articulate why, but he had an instinctual certainty that things wouldn't be all right. The sense of wrongness emanated from the corner, visible in the pale, predatory eyes, and audible in the labored, persistent breath polluting the air. With an air of feigned confidence, Dr. Mendelsohn gestured for Cole and his mother to leave her office. Cole paused, waiting while his mother engaged in further questioning from the doorway. She mentioned something about a timeline, and more regarding a transplant. Yet these terms held no meaning for the boy. Ignoring the conversation's complexities, he remained fixated on the unrelenting sound of breathing echoing through the sterile white hospital corridors. The man had disappeared once they exited the room, but the breathing endured. Even as they departed from the doctor and proceeded toward the elevator, the sound trailed after them. During their journey, Cole intermittently glimpsed the stranger within the hospital's surroundings. First at the entrance of another ward, then within a crowded elevator, and lastly within the vast parking lot where they had left their car. The stranger joined them in the car and remained seated beside Cole throughout the ride home. No words were exchanged among the mother, son, and stranger. Cole remained motionless, observing the stranger who, in return, gazed back with vacant white eyes. Upon arriving back home, the stranger's eerie and unsettling wheezing had become a strangely familiar presence. Cole would never find solace under the constant gaze of the stranger's pallid and observant eyes, but he noticed how his mother attempted to disregard it, and he followed suit. He remained composed as it continued to observe him throughout the remainder of the day. He didn't utter a word when his mother left him alone with the stranger that evening to prepare dinner, and he refrained from acknowledging the man's presence as they silently shared their meal. It wasn't until that very night, right after he had been tucked into bed, that the boy's tears began to flow quietly. The specter exhibited no response to his emotional release. It stood motionless as always, its labored breath echoing in the empty room, its hungry white eyes affixed onto the boy. The man lingered as Cole awoke, and he stayed by his side through the entire subsequent day. Cole had breakfast alongside the specter. They watched cartoons together, and the day unfolded under its vigilant observation. Whenever fatigue overcame the boy, a sensation he had been experiencing more frequently, he would lie down beneath the stranger's predatory stare to rest. Cole wasn't sent back to school, and when he inquired about it, his mother only explained that he didn't need to go back until he was feeling better, an assurance she gave him with confidence. Isolated within the house day after day, the stranger became his sole companion. His mother dedicated most of her time to household chores, and his father appeared to be perpetually confined to his office. As time elapsed, Cole's exhaustion deepened. His incessant fits of coughing left him increasingly drained, and the ever-growing pool of phlegm in his lungs became more stubborn to expel. As weeks melted into days, the line between his own breathing and the stranger's began to blur. Cole's strength waned steadily as the lengthy days progressed, until eventually, exactly 1 month from the day he had first encountered the enigmatic stranger, he started to comprehend the reason behind this bewildering ordeal. The day the boy finally unearthed his answers was a frigid and rainy one. Cole hadn't seen any respite from the storm during the extended hours he had spent confined to his bed. By now, leaving his bed was no longer an option. Even taking a breath had become a challenge, each inhalation obstructed by viscous barriers of mucus. His mother had left cartoons playing to keep him occupied, yet Cole paid them no mind. He could hardly manage to administer his treatments on schedule at this point, as he devoted every other fleeting moment to gazing at the stranger and struggling to draw breath. As his mother departed to retrieve his nightly medication, another bout of coughing gripped Cole. The boy grappled with racking coughs as usual, enduring them for minutes. But then a sense of concern began to creep in. Cole's coughing showed no signs of abating. In fact, he found himself struggling to breathe. Panic took hold of him, and he attempted to cry out for his mother. Yet his lips failed to produce any sound due to the inability to draw in air for forming words. Despite his distress, Cole managed to tumble out of his bed, bringing down the end table with a crash as it hit the floor. The commotion alerted his mother, who rushed into the room shortly after. Witnessing her son's desperate struggle to breathe, she let out a scream, her thinly veiled fear finally breaking through, tears streaming from her wide eyes. Seeing Cole's lack of response, she hurriedly dialed the emergency number for an ambulance. On the floor, Cole continued to writhe, caught in a cycle of coughing and struggling for air. His gaze began to dim, but then he caught sight of his mother and, towering above her, the stooped figure of the stranger. The next time Cole opened his eyes, they were met by the flashing lights of red and blue. He found himself being carried on a stretcher. His mother was visible in the distance, an ambulance in sight, and once again the man was there, his white eyes fixed on him. Cole felt consciousness slipping away once more. With a sudden jolt, he managed to regain his awareness and pry his eyes open again. Everything had changed. The room surrounding him was bright white, unmistakably a hospital. Glancing downward, he noticed he was no longer in his pajamas. Instead, he wore a stiff blue hospital gown. Tubes protruded from his nose, facilitating his breathing. An IV was attached to his arm, piercing his skin. Figures stood above him, their forms cast in shadow by the glaring overhead lights. Among them were 2 men in surgical masks, and in between them, motionless, stood the stranger. The cacophony of raspy breaths overwhelmed him, yet amid the noise, Cole managed to distinguish voices. Among them, he recognized his mother's and that of Dr. Mendelsohn. Their conversation reached his ears, with the doctor mentioning the need for intubation. Though the term held little meaning for Cole, it hardly mattered. He desperately wanted to communicate with his mother, as he had something crucial to share. Although words eluded him, he let out a faint groan. Upon hearing her son's feeble sound, Cole's mother rushed to his side. She clutched him as though holding onto a lifeline, her fingers trembling as she gazed into his eyes, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. With tenderness, she ran her quivering fingers through his hair. Through her tears, she whispered, "It's all right, Cole. You're very sick, but the doctors will give you medicine to make you better, okay?" Despite her reassurance, Cole was now certain that these words held little truth. He comprehended that he wouldn't be all right, yet he remained undeterred. He had something crucial to convey to his mother. Gazing beyond her, Cole's gaze fixed on the stranger, whose white eyes gleamed in the light. He now understood, yet words remained beyond his reach. One of the masked men spoke about a countdown from 10, but Cole couldn't respond. He had unraveled the stranger's identity, and he longed to share this revelation with his mother, who now cradled him tightly against her chest. Yet speech eluded him, the opportunity slipping away. The man behind the surgical mask initiated a slow countdown. and cold liquid surged into Cole's arm through the IV. 10, 9, 8. His grip on consciousness wavered, and he gazed up at the voracious white eyes one last time, but it was too late.